Hey, it is Octo Magic Transmission Day here at the Vinyl Village Garage. Got the transmission professionally rebuilt by me. It's the first one I've ever done. We'll see how this works out, right? Hopefully good, but I had some adult supervision, tearing that thing apart, putting it back together. Didn't get a video on this one because where I was at location just didn't work out, but I will definitely be doing a video on the next one as long as it works. And I'll be saying, hey, I think I have an idea what I'm doing. But we still need to get it put there on the transmission hook to the engine here on the Mockingbird subframe. And as you can tell, I put a little bit of that together. I didn't do a video on that, but I'll do a quick little recap, what we've done so far, what we've gotten in here, and how I kind of got to that point. But a few tips to put a transmission in. I know it's not that complicated-ish, but I want to share some things that might save you a few headaches and get it done more effectively and quickly. And there we go, 1969 400 sitting between the frame rails as it should. Check out those beautiful long branch manifolds. The spark plugs, I know look funny, but they were in there for protecting one painting and keeping dirt out here in the meantime. I'll take those out before we put it back together. Same these valve covers. I like these, they're original, but unfortunately just a little more pitted up than I'd like to see. So I think we're going to get some new ones for it nonetheless. Water pump is the correct one. Look at this nice pulley alignment. So that's the shorter one for 1969 accessory drive. And those who can tell here, look at this plug here, means internally regulated alternator. And I got an open face style alternator. Now, is it that $4,000 date coded one? Absolutely not. But this is going to play the part what we needed for Project Mockingbird here. And I have my new refreshing fan here put on here. So that should work out real nice. Power steering pumps installed. Now, I've got the engine bolted in by the engine mounts down here. One and two, one on each side. And I've got a jack stand underneath the starter to keep this thing from tipping backwards and ripping my mounts out. Because there's a lot of weight hanging on that there because I got no transmission, no cross member to support the back of it. That's going to work to help us get that thing put into place. Now, this transmission came out of that 1969 GTO Turbo 400 short shaft. Now, it looks really clean because it is. I spent a lot of time. Completely gutted everything out of this transmission. Completely every single component piece out of it. Then, I know this might sound scary, I media blasted the entire case. I felt that would get it to where it would look like bare aluminum again. It had layers of undercoating, crud, grime, just sludge and years of buildup. And I thought that was the best way to get it looking back to original. Now, all the bolts, clean those up, paint them back to black, kind of like they were. Now, the cover here for the governor, just cleaned it up, put it back on. So that's the tag. It was very legible. Just had to do a lot of cleaning on it, but I did get all the crud off. Now, unfortunately, the original vacuum modulator got trashed and damaged. Just the real long one, the factory style, it got hit, so we're not going to use that. This came with the rebuild kit. I'll tell you what, that rebuild kit I got had all the frictions and the steels and the seals and the vacuum modulator, like 130, 140 bucks delivered to my door. So super happy with that. New transmission mount. Good idea to go with something like that. Then a rebuilt torque converter ready to go. Now, when it comes to torque converters, high stall, definitely. Standard ones, but doesn't hurt to dump about a quart or so in that torque converter to start with. I'm going to tell you, especially high stall converters, I was always told put transmission fluid in. So that's tip number one there. And then installing the torque converter, I'll show you a couple of tricks on that to make sure you see so you don't blow the front pump out. It's epic fail. Now, we've been over this once before in the past, but this is your first go around. It's some good information. Pontiac, they have two different flex plates. Now, what the difference is, the location of this hole. How far is it from the ring gear? Now, you can tell here, this hole, not quite centered, closer to the outside. But check this one out. It's almost here on this edge here. So this here would be for a smaller bolt pattern torque converter. Now, I've had that kick my butt before. Let's say you're putting the engine in, the whole body, everything's on there. You get it all lined up, you get your bolts in, and you can't line up your torque converter, well, you need to double check your flex plate. It only takes a few seconds, or if you don't have another flex plate, that's fine. I wanted that for example, but literally just take your torque converter, throw it up on the back of the engine, and make sure the bolts line up. And even your pilot hole here, let's say you're going from a manual to an automatic, sometimes there's a bearing or a bushing in here. Torque converter won't seat. You will trash that front pump again because you'll force that torque converter deeply seated into that transmission and tear it up. So it's not a bad idea to take out torque converter and test fit it. I'll show you here. Okay, now, torque converter, not exactly the lightest things, but it should line up inside the back of that crankshaft. Then you can rotate it around and check your bolt holes. In this case here, that one lines right up, so it's going to be a go. Now, I kind of already knew that, but I just wanted you to see that. But it should slide up nice and just right in the side of the back of that crankshaft, no problem at all. And it does. It stays nice and centered, lines up with your bolt. So, quick little thing to save you some grief later on. Because imagine you already got the engine put in, you got to take it right back out. All right, let's talk about the biggest rookie mistake that typically happens on a transmission replacement. Engine replacement, the torque converter kind of comes disengaged or pulled out partially, and you just push it right back in. So you think, right? Well, here's what has to happen. I know this is maybe a review for a few of you, but this has burned me one time in my life, and just don't want to do that again. These two little notches here, this is the drive for the front pump. If you can look deeply inside the transmission, there's a little ear there and an ear on this side here. It's hard to get it to focus, but you can see they're 180 out from each other. Well, that's basically got to slide over top of that, right? Well, how do you know you have it seated all the way? You have splines here for the stator, and you have the other splines here that line up with the torque converter. So you'll feel it go clunk, 1, 2, there'll be a third seat. And by the time it's seated all the way, you will not be able to get your fingers, almost just your tips, between the transmission and the torque converter when it's seated all the way. You know, I almost forgot to dump the transmission fluid in, so let me do that right quick. So, like I said, about a quart or as much as you can get in without it overflowing, but it doesn't hurt at all. So a little fluid in there. Now, of course, this transmission, one here behind us, is, I say it came out of the GTO. I believe it was the second gear clutch pack was completely burned up, and we pulled the pan, and I'll show you some pictures here as I'm talking. Inside the pan, it looked really clean. Normally, that's kind of a telltale sign you probably got a good transmission. You know, so we thought. When we tore it apart, though, that's when we found that clutch pack, as you can see here, not in good shape. So definitely worth taking this one apart. So just because it inside the pan looked good doesn't guarantee it's good. Normally, it's an okay sign, but in this case, we would have got burnt. Anyway, all right, okay, I'll go ahead and get this torque converter put up into place, and I dumped that quart in there. Again, pick it up into place. You should be able to feel it hit the first set of splines. Oh, I think that's actually hit the second one. Yeah, I can get my fingers between the torque converter and the transmission case. All right, here's what I'm talking about. Right now, I can get my fingers up in between here. It feels like it spins okay. Doesn't make any weird noises, but we're not engaged in that pump yet. I should not be able to get my hands in here. So, and you keep on working this thing. Keep pushing on it and spinning on it, it'll eventually seat into place. Oh, there it went. Nice solid clunk. Now I can't even get my fingers in back here at all. Now here's what I'm talking about. If you look down in here now, no way can I get my fingers in between those. That now is definitely engaged into the pump. So I'll go ahead now and roll this thing into place and get it mounted on the back of the engine. Now we'll kind of use my floor jack as a transmission jack. This thing kind of heaves up into place. Now these Turbo 400s, I'll tell you what, they're a little bit heavy. This is the first time I've actually messed with a Turbo 400 in a Firebird. I know it sounds kind of silly, the number I built, but they've all been, honestly, 350 automatics or the old 2-speeds. So this is kind of a new adventure for me. But it still works the same. Okay. Now I started on the dowels. Get a couple bolts started in that. Get you up here a little bit closer. Now, if you can look at the gap here, it's a little tighter and it gets a little wider. Well, that's the advantage of using the jack. You know, pump it up a few pumps here. Watch that gap close up. Now my gap is nice and even. Now the bolts I'm using, 3/8, 16. I use a lock wash on them. Now there's lots of thoughts between lock washers and aluminum, but I figured it's better than nothing. The factory used a similar bolt, I think similar to the intake bolts, have that flange behind them. I don't have those bolts, they're missing, but I have plenty of these. So now that's got a nice even gap. I'll go ahead and use the bolts just to kind of walk right up into place, where I could probably slide it on the jack here. Look at that, yeah. It just closes up the gap, no problem. So I get these bolts torqued down, climb underneath. That torque converter should spin freely if I got everything right. It is bolted to the back of the engine, torqued down, snugged up as it should be. Climb down underneath here. Now our torque converter should spin freely. And look at that, it sure does. Now, There is a situation now. This is actually looks pretty good. Maybe 1/8 of an inch between the flex plate and the torque converter. Now, if you've got to move this out quite a bit, you can actually disengage the torque converter enough for the front pump that it can actually cause damage to the pump. There's actually a spec somewhere that tells you how much space you're supposed to have, but to me, that's about the normal space I've ever seen. So you'll just kind of pop this thing forward, and as you can tell, then I line my bolts up, get them all started, then torque them down. Now, if you look at this transmission pan, there's a big gaping hole in it. That's only because it's on here temporarily for transportation. Because you ever try to pick up a Turbo 400 transmission and move it around? Yeah, they're kind of heavy. So I leave the old crappy pan that I have on here so I can drag it on the shop floor, throw it in the back of the truck. But I have a nice cleaned up pan sitting right there. I'm gonna work on putting it on the car here now. So nonetheless, that's the things I wanted to show you about getting a torque converter installed, transmission bolts up to the back of the engine without damaging the front pump to help ensure you have a good chance this thing might actually move. One last thing before I wrap up and call it quits here for today. The transmission stamped right here for your serial number or the VIN number. If you want to check numbers matching stuff, driver's side of the case, the number was stamped on this one right here. I've had a hell of a time finding those. Honestly, this is the first time I've actually looked for the numbers just because I wanted to confirm that was the original. Yeah, it was the original transmission for that GTO, and I couldn't find it anywhere until after I cleaned the case. Right there she be, just in case you wanted to know where that number was stamped. Well, as you can tell, my pile of parts, which is sitting back here, has diminished immensely. The air cleaner doesn't go back on it, the flex plate doesn't go on it, so those parts aren't even part of the car any longer. Need to do the distributor upgrade. We're going to ditch the points, so it's going to be pointless. We're going to do that again. That's an Excel kit. Used to like Pertronics components, but they've had some problems there as of recently what I've been reading, and I don't want any troubles out of this stuff. I tried the Excel one, super easy to install. Probably do another video on that, so I'll do the pointless video. And you can tell something else on top of the engine is missing, the carburetor. We actually have acquired a 1969 Pontiac 400 Firebird carburetor for an automatic. It wasn't a Ram Air 3 carb, but it's definitely going to play the part for what we're building here. So I'll probably do some video on taking a Quadrajet apart, going through it, cleaning it, and getting it set up, put back into service. And I've had a lot of luck with those, and I've actually had the most, like I say, I'm most satisfied with putting Quadrajets back on these Pontiacs. I tried Edelbrock on a few builds, had a problem with heat soaks, just didn't run right, kind of fell on his face, stumbling issues. Quadrajet all the way seems to be the best for me. Never tried Holley, probably never will. I'm going to stick with what I know that works. And not to mention, I'm going to put the Ram Air pans on that. The way the Ram Air pan attaches, you really do kind of need a Quadrajet carburetor. It makes life a whole lot easier. So we're going to do a video on that. So I know this little transmission video probably wasn't the most exciting, but maybe I shared a few things to save you some grief or save you from trashing your newly rebuilt or a Craigslist rebuilt. Spray paint rebuilds everything. Rebuilt transmission. So I don't want you to damage those things, or at least you can't blame your install on that if you got all the tips, or at least know some idea or some things behind the scenes. So I appreciate you following me on the journey. Thank you for watching. I'll grab the camera and I hope to see you all next time.